This video is for you if you've been interested in rental real estate for passive income. I went from 0 to 90 doors in under 5 years. But when people hear 90 doors, all they think is freedom. But nobody actually sees what it takes to keep all of this running. By the end of this video, you'll understand what it looks like running a real estate portfolio day to day. So you can decide if this is something you actually want. So when I tell people that I have 90 doors of real estate, the first thing they ask is, why do you still work? That's the number one question I get. People are like, that should be more than enough to cover your expenses. And they assume that you've made it. And when I think back, really got here by accident. I had no idea what it was going to take to run a business at this scale. I didn't even intentionally try to get to this scale. But I think once you get to 90 doors, people imagine that you're living like Grant Cardone and you have everything figured out and it's all good. But once I actually got to this level, I started to see how real it is, how much work is involved. When I think back to when I first started, my first purchase, I went from 0 to 7 doors overnight, and that was in two separate buildings. But when I think back to how simple it was back then, like I was actually managing the business with Google Sheets, right? I could store the leases in my Google Drive. I could do all my accounting in Google Sheets. I mean, it was just a really simple business. You only have 7 people paying you rent. You only have 2 mortgages to pay, a couple of utility bills. It was just very simple. And then once we scaled to 90 doors, of course, it got very, very complex. And so now, when I just think about how the operations of the business has changed, I have all sorts of software in place. I have all sorts of vendors in place. I have processes. I'm running a full-blown enterprise. And so things just changed very quickly in a way that I wasn't exactly prepared for. Elon Musk always says that if you tell yourself you have 2 days to do something, you will take the 2 days to do it. But if you tell yourself you only have 30 minutes, you will crank something out in 30 minutes. And that's how I look at the real estate business. I wasn't prepared to manage 90 doors, but when 90 doors came and I have all these responsibilities in front of me, you have no choice but to show up and figure it out. So luckily, I have a background of figure it out. This was just one other experience to add to my resume. I posted a video the other day talking about how real estate is an operations business disguised as an investment. And so I wanted to talk a little bit more about what the operations business looks like and what does a normal week feel like. I kind of want to share some of the unpredictability. And I think the biggest takeaway is that it's just always something. So, like, if you are not prepared to fight fires constantly and always have something to do, real estate is going to be a tough road for you. Although it's presented as a passive income option, it requires a lot of hand holding. So, I actually thought about some of the things that keep me busy day to day, week to week in that business. And I came up with 8 key categories of where we must handhold and babysit this business in order to keep the revenue coming in. So we have maintenance requests, we have accounting and bookkeeping, leasing, vendor management, tenant matters, property upkeep and rehabs, admin and evictions. Like if this was a large company, that would be 8 different departments. But because I don't have a property manager and I'm running this all on my own, of course I have a team to help me, but the success, the operations, the upkeep, the figure it out, the what do we do, all of that falls on me. So just this week, I'm going to recount just some of the issues that came up. We have a tenant who was unhappy about something, so she called the health department. We have new tenants moving in. We have a tenant who gave a deposit who is now saying they don't want to move in and it is past the refundable period. We have active evictions going on. What else? I have a bookkeeping issue that I have to resolve. It's kind of funny, but one of our tenants who actually lives in unit 1, the system thinks they live in unit 2. And now that I'm trying to move somebody into unit 2, we have to figure all this out. So, and then you put on top of that the clogged toilets, the grass needing to be cut. It just run the gamut. And so, having been a real estate investor for the past 8 years has kind of taught me how to be resilient. You know, none of these issues are life threatening. And I think that's what you have to keep in mind, that take a deep breath, think clearly, and you can work this out. And so a lot of these I've encountered before, so we kind of already know what to do. We have processes, but as a new investor, some of these issues can be pretty daunting, and you may start to question yourself and your abilities. But trust me, if you have enough in you to come up with a down payment, to find properties to buy, to actually pull the trigger, this is nothing. You can figure out all of these issues. Right. And I think what drains my energy the most is probably dealing with the tenants, honestly, because think about how important your home is to you. They have an emotional attachment to their home and where they're living. And I also have an emotional attachment because I own the property. When tenants don't do what they're supposed to do, everybody's upset. And so, what people don't see is the energy drain that comes from managing all these types of issues. I mean, that was just 1 week. Like, imagine 52 weeks of issue upon issue upon issue. It can start to weigh on you. And it did start to weigh on me for a while as we were scaling and I hadn't necessarily built out the team. I was just taking on more and more and more. And then I started to realize that no, this is not a physical exhaustion. It's just the constant, the tracking, the remembering, the deciding, like everything that's going on in my head all day long. Not to mention that I have a full-time job and I have a kid and I have all these other things. I have a personal brand that I'm managing. Like, I just have so many irons in the fire that it became abundantly clear that like I need to build out a team to help me manage these 90 rental units, even if that means I give up a little bit of profitability. So now out of those 8 things that I named, I now own only 3 and a half of them. Everything else has been, and when I say outsourced, I don't mean hiring some random person. I'm a big fan of hiring people that I know, but let me be clear, capable people that I know. I have some friends who work in corporate and they are just sharp, sharp, sharp. And so those people are great for like process management, doing the bookkeeping and accounting, doing this, doing that. And I love to support entrepreneurs, but what was most important for me was working with people who would allow me to be flexible, who would allow me to change my mind, and who would allow me to design the system live. And so they used to call it building the airplane while taking off. That's exactly what we're doing here. Every new situation that I encounter, every new scenario that brings itself to me, it helps shape how we operate. And so I love working with people who are in alignment with that. When I had a property manager, it is very strict. You don't have a lot of control. They pretty much control the operations, who they put in your unit, what maintenance men are there, when they're going, pricing. They control everything. And I needed more flexibility than that. So back to my team, putting other people, or I should say, giving other people responsibilities and completely letting go and letting them own it has really freed up a lot of the mental load that I used to have. I mean, I used to pretty much be on nonstop because real estate is a 24/7 business. People aren't touting that, but toilets clog all hours of the night. Things happen on the weekends. Like it's always something. And that was one of the first things that I had to put in place because my weekends and weeknights and that's precious time to me. So that's where we started integrating things like our property management software where tenants can text directly or they can drop in maintenance requests. And now I have AI responding to those things. So, and then the team gets a daily email every morning showing these are all the phone calls that came in. These are all the text messages. These are everything. So we don't have to feel like we are chained to the phone or chained to the computer seeing what's going on. We know within 24 hours we would not have missed anything. And so that was just one thing we put in place to kind of protect the mental load of the entire team. One of the other areas that I'm so happy that I was able to resolve because it was very hard on me mentally. And that was because I used to internalize the performance of the building. So at the close of every month, after you've collected all the rent, you've paid all your expenses, you're looking at your profitability. I shared in my previous video that some months are more profitable than others. And so on those months, like say you have a month where you made 8,000 and then the next month you make 2,000. I would internalize that and go deep and go down huge rabbit holes about what could I have done differently? What processes do we need? What this, what that? And then I finally realized that that is the business. People who are saying that they make 10K a month, they make 20, 30K a month. Trust me, it's not every month. It means they've done it. but it doesn't mean they're consistent. And so that becomes the game with real estate is how do you make the money consistent? And that's where I lean into looking where are we wasting time? Where are we going back and forth with people where we don't have time for that? What can be automated? And so just looking at those efficiencies, that helps control a lot of the money drain and the slip that happens month to month. But I think the biggest lesson that I've learned thus far in owning all of this real estate is that it is not passive income, it is managed income. And I think the perspective that I have now about passive income has significantly helped my mental space when it comes to the ups and downs of the profitability in the business. I think it's absolutely fabulous to get passive income, but I won't miss it. So, for example, on my personal brand YouTube page, if I put out a digital product, I'm not sitting by the phone every day waiting on Stripe alerts. But when they come, it's great. We're celebrating, we're happy. So that's kind of how I look at passive income. Real estate is managed income, which means when I miss that income, I feel it. I'm expecting that income. And so when that income doesn't happen, I got to shift some other things around. I got to become a money ninja and figure out how to make all these things fit into place. And so that's how I look at it now. It's managed income. I work very hard for it month to month. Very hard is in direct quote. I put a lot of mental energy towards this business, is what I really mean by work hard. And so that's a myth that I just want to clear up that it's not passive at all. And even if you have a property manager, now your job, instead of managing the business, now you're managing the property manager because it is not their business. They don't care about it as much as you do, and they are just getting by day to day. And so now you have to make sure they're making the right decisions and that they're following up and that they're not wasting 3 weeks getting a new tenant into your unit, et cetera, et cetera. So it's all the same. You're going to manage it one way or the other. And so when I think back to how did we even get here, it was probably around 2021 or maybe it was 2020 and we were sitting in the house and everybody was at home and the real estate prices were actually really good. It was right before things got super expensive and we also had a lot of government funds. So we had tenants paying for a year in full because they just had so much money. So the tenants were flush with money, which meant the business was flush with money and we're like, okay, now's the time. Buy, buy, buy. And then I think the other lever that told me it was time was I remember our first month where we made 2,500 and I had the bright idea to like, we need to 10x this. Like, we need to go for 10K. We need to go for 20K. And the only way I thought we could do that was to scale the business. And so I'm like, we have 8 properties. I was like, let's turn it into 16. And then the next year, we ended up getting up to 24. And so each of those buildings, some have 2 units, 3 units, and 4 units. That's how I get to my 90 doors of real estate. Like the closer and closer we got to 100 doors, it was like, let's go for it. Let's see how many we can buy. Let's pull all the money we have from everywhere and just make these investments. And the pricing was good and the interest rates were good. And it was just a great time. So I only saw opportunity. I wasn't looking at any risk. I wasn't thinking about how my workload was going to expand. Remember, I told you I went from Google Sheets and now I don't even have a system. So now I'm scrambling like, okay, it was a lot of operational change we had to put in place when we first started with those first 7 doors. You used to be able to mail in your rent check and or go directly to the bank and deposit it. And so that worked for a bit, but now that you're up to 90 people coming in the bank, putting in your deposit, I can't wait on the mail anymore. It's just too much because now we got to go to the bank and now we're depositing 30, 40, 50 checks. No, no, no. So it was just a lot of operational change, things that needed to happen. But what I will say and give myself credit for is that I did not overthink because a lot of people, I think that's what slows them down. Before you can even buy one property, you're trying to prepare how to run 100. You're trying to make sure you got the perfect property management software. You're trying to make sure you got your processes, you're this, you're that. I'm not saying spend a moment working on those things until you need them. I'm saying keep them in the back of your mind that they will be needed, but do not let them slow you down. Do not get into a perfectionist loop that says, I can't even buy a property or I can't make any investment until I have everything buttoned up. So we scaled fast and dare I say too fast. Would I do it again? No. Would I go from 7 doors to 90 doors in a little under 4 years? I probably would slow down a little and do a little more consideration, but that is my personality. I'm a little bit all or nothing, right? I was all in, so I was all in. And the reason I say we scale too fast is because the newer the property and the better shape the property is in, of course, it comes at a higher price point. What I would suggest for investors now is that is exactly where you should start. Spend the money. When you buy a lot of properties that are deals like I did, when you look back, you start to realize that you just bought a bunch of problems. And when you're an inexperienced investor, you don't know enough to see those problems coming. So I think I would have slowed down a little bit to get a little bit more awareness of what the problems were, because now I'm in a situation where some of my major systems are starting to age. And I'm talking about water heaters, roofs, HVAC systems. And when you buy a newer property, you have 15 or 20 years before you have to worry about that. But for me, some of my properties are 10 years in, and I'm having to look at replacing some systems or figuring out if I'm going to hold on to the property. Instead of buying 4 properties, buy 2 properties and really invest in those two to make them appear like brand new properties. That's what I would have done differently. So we have 24 properties. I probably could scale back to 10 and really invest in those 10. And if that cut back on a lot of the maintenance costs that I'm having and a lot of the systems replacements and all of this, and I would keep my buildings with my very best tenants and in my very best neighborhoods, I could probably make the same amount of money. However, having more doors does give me a lot of buffer, right? So I can have 2 or 3 buildings that are simply not performing. I can let a unit that needs a major work. Like right now, I have a unit that is there was a leak from the upstairs unit leaked into the bottom unit, and we just told the contractor to rip everything out. So I have a unit that's back to the studs. And so I can afford to let it sit empty until I feel like doing the repairs because I have all these other buildings that kind of help me weather the storms and the ups and the downs. Versus when you do have a smaller portfolio, a big hit, you might feel it a little bit more. And by no means am I trying to talk you out of buying rental real estate. But a lot of the content I see online is only giving the glitz and the glamour. It's only giving the positives. And I'm here to keep it real with you that it's give and take. So, as good as it feels to make 10 and 20K a month, imagine how it feels to make zero sometimes. Imagine how it feels to get calls on nights and weekends and all the operational bottlenecks that I mentioned. And so if I had to give advice to a new investor about how to prepare for all the ups and downs, both financially and operationally, I came up with 6 things. First, you want to pick manageable properties. You want to pay attention to the age of your homes. I mentioned that the newer, the better, because that's less headache for you. Second, is get rid of your problem tenants immediately, even if they pay. I have fallen into traps like that before where we have tenants where they simply refuse to allow maintenance people in their apartment. And so repairs don't get done in a timely manner, which makes a small repair become a very big repair. And guess who has to pay for that? We do. But because the tenant pays on time all the time, we used to turn a blind eye to poor behavior. But when you get up to 90 units, you just don't have the capacity for that. Third, be prepared to do a lot of hiring and firing. I have never fired so many people in my life. Working with vendors is interesting. You would think that these people care about being professionals and they care about their reputations and that they want to make money. But a lot of the vendors that you end up using, they simply learned a trade. And so you're trying to run a full-fledged operation and they're treating their trade like a side hustle or something like that. And so if a contractor is dragging their feet, if they're stringing you along, fire them and move on. I don't care what the relationship is. Fourth, I would say save 20% of your monthly profit. And that's something I put in place probably 4 or 5 years in, halfway through. I started to realize that If I make 10K this month, it doesn't mean I should take 10K home because next month I'm gonna have to possibly maybe a water heater breaks and I need to come up with 1,500. So if I make 10K, I leave 2K in the account. That way I have some buffer. And so it just continues to grow and grow and grow. The effects of the clogged toilets and the this and the that, you start to feel that less and less. It doesn't affect your profitability. And that's another way I try to smooth things out so that we can see less huge peaks and valleys in our take home profit. Okay, five, I don't give people chances. I don't give tenants chances. I don't give vendors chances. I don't give anybody chances because every time I've given somebody a chance, they've burned me. Every time. Now I ask a very simple question. Are you looking for help or handout? And a lot of times it just stops people dead in their tracks because they're like, she sees the scam coming. I have a saying that I type to people regularly: go back to scam school. Not here, not today, not buying it. So people, everybody's trying to skirt by. Everybody's trying to get one over on you. The vendors are trying to overcharge and not do all the work. The tenants are asking for rent payment extensions. They're working with agencies and not keeping up their end of the bargain. It just everybody is running something. So I don't give anybody chances. If it doesn't smell right initially, I'm out and I find somebody else. And I think we have trained people in the city where I own property that we don't play. We are very business minded. This is not mom and pop. Have your stuff together. Come at me like you come at the US government. And then number six, put something in place to protect your peace. And I mentioned that I use AI. I have all these processes so that my phone literally does not ring. When I tell you when we first started scaling, my phone was ringing all day long from somebody about something. And I'm at work and I'm trying to multitask and I'm context switching and I'm working on something for work and then I got to get this lease out and I'm working on something for work and now this vendor needs an approval on a price. I had to put processes in place so that I'm not exhausted at the end of the day from all that mental jumping around I've been doing all day. So that's how I protect my peace and I make sure that the time that is important to me, I put boundaries around that time and I create operations that support those boundaries. So if you are a new investor or you're looking to get into investments, do not ask how many doors do you want. You have to ask yourself what kind of responsibility are you willing to carry? I make money for high functioning. I make money. I make videos for high functioning knowledge workers who are looking to build leverage outside of corporate. You can find me on Substack at Confidence is Cash, and you can follow my other channel, the Prompt Life Podcast, here on YouTube, which is where I share all the behind the scenes of my AI experiments and how I'm using AI to do all of the things. All the important links are in descriptions. That's all I got for you guys this week.